Greetings, everyone, and welcome once again to Listening to His Word with Darrell Bean. Tonight's topic is going to be on a passage that we find in 2 Corinthians chapter 10. And as you see on the PowerPoint slide, Take Every Thought Captive is the title of our talk. Now, I'm very passionate about this subject. I'm passionate about it for several reasons, not the least of which is the fact that I see and have seen so much suffering, not only on the part of people of the world without God, but people who are children of God, who are suffering so many things, so many problems in their lives. There's so much unhappiness in the lives of too many people who name the name of God because of the fact that we don't place enough emphasis in our personal life on what Paul is teaching here in 2 Corinthians 10. And so in the few minutes that we have tonight, I would like to read this passage and then talk about our thought life in a kind of general way. And then next time, get into some of the practical implications of what Paul has written here. But I want to look at various passages in the Bible to focus our minds on how important this subject really is. In fact, the Bible teaches about the importance of our thinking and the effect that it has on our lives. Take, for instance, Proverbs 23 and verse 7, where the writer says, "Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the issues of life." And so the idea is that whatever comes into the sphere of our consciousness, in other words, when a thought comes through, I need to be able to recognize that it's there, recognize its nature. Is it in line with God's thinking? Is it out of line with God's thinking? And then make a decision about what I'm going to do with it. Well, the Bible teaches us how to do those things. The question is, what kind of focus do we have on these things? So our talk tonight is going to be mainly for the purpose of getting us a little bit more focused. And then in our next talk, we'll get into some of the practical applications, as I said, to the verse. So let's take up to the reading. So first of all, let's go over here to the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 10. I'm just going to read verses 3 through 5 of this passage, because that'll give us the gist of what we're going to be dealing with. He says, "For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh, for the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but divinely powerful for the destruction of fortresses. We are destroying speculations and every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God, and we are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ." Well, we've had some great preaching on this subject here at the Kirkland congregation this past year. Last week, one of our young men led a devotional that was focused on taking every thought captive and this passage. And it was very well presented, very well thought out, as this young man talked about the impact that this passage had on his life. And I'm telling you, I listened with a great deal of joy. I wish more and more and more people were tuned in to what is being taught in this passage and were reaping the benefits of it. So it is to that end that we'll do some study on this passage and talk about some of the things that the Bible teaches about this passage. And so in Romans chapter 2 and verse 12, so we have Proverbs 23 and verse 7, "Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the issues of life." And so our life and the quality of our life is directly affected. In Romans 12, Paul says in verse 2, "And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." It is that renewing of the mind that we're going to be focusing on. You know, over in Psalm chapter 50 and verse 23, David says there, "And To him who orders his way aright, I will show the salvation of God. How am I going to order my way aright without proper thinking? Well, this is going to be our focus here in our talk. And so as we move along then, and we think about, and we think about what was taught in Proverbs 23 and in Romans 2. First of all, based on what we see in Proverbs 23:7, it is possible to believe in my thought life what is false. That's why I have to diligently watch over it, because of that very possibility. Second of all, there is a true reality to which I should conform. If I'm not to be conformed to this world and the false reality that it presents, then that must mean there is a true reality to which I need to conform. So let's go over to Ephesians chapter 4 for a moment. This is a great passage on this topic. I mean, it really is. It's powerful. It's loaded with content. But let's take a look at it and see if we can glean some things from Ephesians chapter 4 that will help us here in our study. In verse 17, Paul starts out there saying, "This I say, therefore, and affirm together with the Lord, that you walk no longer just as the Gentiles also walk. Don't live your lives the way the ungodly live their lives." And then he'll talk about some of the things that go into that. He says, "Do not walk as the Gentiles also walk in the futility of their mind, being darkened in their understanding because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their hearts." So the ungodly were walking according to their own thoughts. And Paul says that is futility. It leads to futility. They're darkened in their understanding because of their ignorance. They don't know. They're not thinking about their inner life. Okay? And so because of the ignorance that is in them, and Paul goes on now and he talks about the results of that ignorance. Let's turn over here for a moment and look what he continues here to say. He says, they have become callous, have given themselves over to sensuality. So their hearts are hard. They're calloused. And as a result of the way they think, they're going to be living in a certain way. Having become callous, they have given themselves over to sensuality for the practice of every kind of impurity with greediness. What I want you to see here is that this starts out with people's hearts. It starts out with how they think. And so, yes, the heart, or from the heart come the issues, the springs of life. This is what we're seeing exemplified here, but right now in a negative way. This has to do with the ungodly and their way of thinking and the callousness and the hardness of their heart and what it leads to. He says, but you did not learn Christ in this way. So on the one hand, we have people who, because of how they think, have ended up as ignorant people who are relying in that ignorance on their own thinking, and it's resulting in callousness, hardness of heart, sensuality, the practice of every kind of impurity with greediness. But then Paul says, you did not learn Christ in this way. Wow. The reason I'm hesitating here is because there's just so much in here to talk about. And there's so little time to talk about it. And so I want us to think about this. Look at where these individuals started. But now he says, but you did not learn Christ in this way. And he goes on then, says, if indeed you have heard him, not your thinking, but him. If you have heard him and been taught in him, just as truth is in Jesus, that in reference to your former manner of life, you lay aside the old self, which is being corrupted in accordance with the lust of deceit, and that you be renewed, there it is again, in the spirit of your mind, there it is again, and put on the new self, which in the likeness of God has been created in righteousness and holiness of the truth. So now instead of ignorance, hard-heartedness, callousness, impurity, sensuality, and all of that practice with greediness, now we have on the other side individuals who are learning from Christ, and as a result of that, there is a renewal of the mind that is going to manifest itself in righteousness and holiness that comes as a result of living according to truth, which is things as they really are. Well, this is where we're going. This is what we're getting at. And I really thought I would have had time to present so much more to you, but stay there. I'll be back in a flash to continue this talk. But let's take this foundation that we're laying so far, think about it, and tune in for our next talk. It'll be up in a flash really quickly. You'll have it. So anyway, thanks so much for listening. I've got some other business to take care of. But until then, onward and upward, my friends. We'll see you next time. Take care.